is still a profoundly moving statement of our value, and it has never been more pertinent than it is now. It's over. Queen Camilla has been stripped of her crown. The words reverberated through Britain like a shockwave. At precisely 6 p.m., on October 25, 2025, Buckingham Palace confirmed what no one thought conceivable. King Charles himself had rescinded Queen Camilla's royal title after what insiders described as a catastrophic confrontation behind palace walls. For the first time in modern history, a monarch had publicly undone the very marriage that once redefined the crown. Outside the palace gates, crowds assembled in disbelief, clutching newspapers that read, "Camilla falls." Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but no one from the royal household spoke. Behind those heavy golden doors, however, the truth was far darker than any headline. According to sources close to the royal circle, the argument between Charles and Camilla escalated when he confronted her with evidence linking her to the mysterious disappearance and alleged resale of priceless jewelry belonging to Princess Diana and Queen Elizabeth. He claimed she had betrayed not only him but the entire crown, one aide whispered, and she offered no denial. When the confrontation concluded, Charles ordered her titles revoked immediately, from Queen Consort back to Duchess of Cornwall, and within hours, her official portraits were removed from palace corridors, her name excised from court schedules. One witness described seeing her depart Buckingham's East Wing, head held high but eyes hollow, the echo of her heels marking the end of an era. For a king already grappling with fragile health and public skepticism, it was an act both tragic and necessary. A monarch reclaiming his authority even as his heart broke in doing so. And yet the question haunting the nation tonight is not merely why Charles acted, but what Camilla truly did to merit such humiliation. Because according to palace insiders, this scandal didn't begin yesterday. It has been years in the making, built on secrets, envy, and the shadows of the Queen's past. Stay with me, because what unfolded inside Buckingham that night would expose the darkest betrayal the modern monarchy has ever witnessed. 24 hours before the palace's bombshell announcement, the tension inside Highgrove House had already reached its breaking point. King Charles had summoned Queen Camilla to what aides described as a private reconciliation meeting, but this was no gentle exchange between husband and wife. It was an interrogation. The king, weary from weeks of whispered scandals, sat at his mahogany desk, surrounded by documents, photographs, and a single velvet jewelry box. "Where did it go, Camilla?" he asked, voice trembling yet sharp. Inside, the box was nothing, an empty space where a sapphire brooch once rested. It was the same brooch Diana had worn in the famous engagement portrait, later preserved in the royal collection and now missing. Camilla leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable. "You're listening to gossip," she said coldly. "Do you think I would risk everything for a few stones?" But the king's gaze did not waver. According to an aide who overheard fragments of the conversation, he had obtained records from Christie's auction house, linking the sale of a historic royal piece to a private account traced to a friend of the Queen. "You told me you cherished what she left behind," Charles said, voice tightening. "Instead, you've been selling memories, Camilla Rose," the anger in his eyes flickering. "Memories? You mean ghosts? You've lived with her ghost more than you've lived with me." She turned toward the window, her reflection framed by the gray sky. "You made me a queen, but you never stopped treating me like a replacement." The words cut deeper than any scandal could. For years, Charles had fought to legitimize her place beside him against public outrage and even his own family's resistance. Now that foundation had fractured in a single night. The argument escalated, echoing through the corridors of Highgrove. Voices rose, accusations hurled. A porcelain vase, one that had once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II, shattered on the floor. The moment froze the room. "You've broken more than a crown tonight," Charles said quietly. By morning, Camilla had departed for London without a word. Palace staff noted she arrived at Buckingham hours before her husband, her face pale, her jewelry conspicuously absent. One guard claimed she carried only a small clutch. No tiara, no brooches, not even her engagement ring. When Charles entered later that evening, his decision was already made. "The crown cannot coexist with deceit," he told his advisors, "not even in marriage." That night he drafted the royal decree himself, the first of its kind in modern British history. And as the palace braced for the storm, one thing became evident. The scandal was no longer simply about missing jewels. It was about the betrayal that shattered the heart of a king and the downfall of the woman who once wore the crown with pride. The next morning, the story was everywhere. A tidal wave of headlines crashed through every corner of Britain before Buckingham Palace had even drawn its curtains. Royal jewels missing. Queen Camilla implicated. Crowning crisis. Charles betrayed. Again. It was as if history had turned back on itself, the ghosts of Diana and Elizabeth returning to haunt the House of Windsor once more. At 8:09 a.m., BBC Radio 4 interrupted its morning broadcast with a breaking update. Multiple sources confirmed that senior palace officials were investigating irregularities involving items from the royal collection. On social media, hashtags like Crown Without Grace and Justice for Camilla began trending globally. In just hours, the story had become a wildfire, one no official statement could contain. According to The Guardian, investigators had traced the sale of several rare jewels, including a pair of sapphire earrings and a brooch once worn by both Princess Diana and Queen Elizabeth II, to an anonymous Swiss account. The account, registered under a private foundation, had a single UK intermediary, a longtime confidant of Queen Camilla, inside the palace. Chaos ensued. Advisors scrambled to prepare a response, but King Charles refused to release one. "No denials," he said, sharply. "If it's true, we speak once. If it's false, silence will speak louder." That silence only intensified speculation. By midday, television anchors were dissecting every public appearance of Camilla over the past 2 years. Tabloids published side-by-side images comparing her necklaces and earrings to archived royal heirlooms. "Are these the same jewels?" one headline asked. The Daily Express went further. "Did Camilla sell what once belonged to Diana, or is this another palace setup?" While London buzzed with rumors, the emotional weight fell heaviest on Prince William and Princess Catherine. At Kensington Palace, aides described the couple's mood as heartbroken, not shocked. William had long defended his stepmother publicly out of loyalty, not affection, but this scandal changed everything. That afternoon, Catherine appeared at a Duchess charity event in Surrey, wearing a modest pendant once owned by Diana. The gesture was no coincidence. Cameras captured her somber expression as she greeted guests, the light glinting on the small diamond at her throat, a silent tribute and a message. The crowd understood immediately. "She's reminding them who the true Queen of Hearts was," one woman whispered to a reporter. Meanwhile, Princess Anne was seen arriving at Buckingham via a private entrance. Sources say she requested a closed-door meeting with the king. "You can't save both her and the institution," she told her brother. "Not this time." Anne had never been one for sentiment. Her loyalty was to the monarchy itself, not to those who tarnished it. By evening, the world's major networks were broadcasting live from London. From CNN in New York to LCI in Paris, the narrative was the same. The royal marriage was collapsing in real time. One moment in particular captured global attention. A leaked clip of King Charles leaving a meeting at Clarence House when a journalist shouted, "Your Majesty, do you still trust the Queen?" He paused, turned slightly, and said quietly, "There is only one crown, and it belongs to Britain, not to those who wear it." The statement went viral within minutes. It was the clearest signal yet that the king had made up his mind. Across Britain, public reaction was fierce. Outside Buckingham Palace, people gathered in candlelight vigils for Diana, chanting softly, "She never truly left us." Others demanded a complete reform of the monarchy, calling this the final crack in an outdated institution. But not everyone was against Camilla. A smaller group outside Westminster Abbey held signs reading, "She stood by him when no one else did." One woman from Bath told reporters, "Charles made her a queen. Now he's destroying her to save himself." The country was divided, and for the first time, sympathy leaned toward neither the king nor his fallen consort. It leaned toward the idea of truth itself. As the debate raged, international viewers joined in, flooding comment sections with their own reactions. From Sydney to Toronto, people shared the same shock. "It's like watching history repeat itself," one commenter wrote. And now I'd love to hear from you. What do you think of this scandal? Was Charles justified in stripping Camilla of her titles? Or has he made the monarchy's biggest mistake yet? And where in the world are you watching this story unfold? From London, New York, Melbourne, or somewhere else entirely? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to know how this royal storm looks from your corner of the world. Because, as one journalist put it tonight, in Britain's oldest family, nothing breaks quietly. Not crowns, not hearts. Night fell over Buckingham Palace, but sleep had long abandoned the royal household. What began as whispers in the corridors now echoed like thunder through marble halls. Gods had been reassigned, aides dismissed early, and even the chandeliers in the blue drawing room burned dimmer than usual, as if the palace itself sensed what was coming. At 9:42 p.m., Queen Camilla arrived unannounced, her black Rolls-Royce stopping just beyond the gates. Cameras flashed. The press surged forward, but she did not utter a word. Dressed in a charcoal gray gown and a strand of pearls that had once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II, she entered the palace with the poise of a woman who still believed she belonged there. Yet everyone inside knew that tonight, that illusion would end. In the king's private study, Charles sat behind his desk, his face pale beneath the amber lamplight. A thin folder lay before him, a dossier of auction records, internal emails, and statements from the Royal Collection Trust. Each page was another nail in the coffin of trust. When Camilla entered, she paused in the doorway, sensing the distance between them had grown more than physical. She spoke evenly, her voice a mixture of arrogance and fatigue. You finally decided to believe the papers over your own wife. Charles did not look up at first. I've decided to believe the truth, he said, his tone low but resolute. And the truth, Camilla, is uglier than any headline. She stepped closer, eyes flashing. You think I sold those jewels? For what? Money? Attention? Control? He replied coldly. You've always wanted to be queen, and more than in name. But what you've done dishonors both Diana and my mother. At the mention of those names, Camilla's composure cracked. Don't you dare, she hissed. You've lived your whole life haunted by ghosts. I was the one who stayed when they all turned their backs. And now you trade me for sympathy. Charles rose slowly, the weariness of age and illness etched into every line of his face. You stayed because the crown gave you purpose, he said. But now you've stolen from it, and from her. He gestured toward a framed portrait of the late queen. There are things even love cannot excuse. Love? Camilla laughed bitterly. Don't talk to me about love, Charles. You used me to fill a void that never closed. You made me a queen, but only so you could pretend you weren't still a widower. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, rain tapped against the window panes like distant applause. For a brief moment, they simply stared at each other, two people bound by decades of scandal, now reduced to strangers. Finally, Charles reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folded document sealed with a royal crest. He placed it on the table between them. This is the formal revocation of your royal status, he said quietly. As of midnight, you will no longer hold the title of Queen Consort. You will retain the courtesy title of Duchess of Cornwall. Nothing more. Camilla's breath caught, but her pride did not waver. You think this saves you? She spat. It only proves what they've always said. You're weak. You'll die a king nobody feared and nobody loved. Charles did not answer. Instead, he removed a small velvet case from his pocket and opened it. Inside lay the Queen Consort's signet ring, the one he had given her on the day of his coronation. Slowly, he set it down beside the decree. You once said power is the only thing that endures, he murmured. Let's see how long yours lasts without grace. She stared at the ring, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with fury. You'll regret this, she said. You can take the title, but you can't take what I know. Then speak, Charles said, voice quiet but cutting. Tell them everything. Tell them about the jewels, the dinners, the letters. Tell them how you turned loyalty into leverage. Because the truth, Camilla, will outlast every lie. For the first time, her confidence faltered. She reached for the ring, then stopped midway. The king watched as her hand trembled. Finally, she turned away. "Enjoy your crown, Charles," she said coldly. "It won't keep you warm when I'm gone." She left. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble, the sound of defiance but also of defeat. Outside the palace gates, flashes erupted as she stepped back into the storm. Her driver opened the door, but before getting in, she turned toward Say. The crowd, face hard, chin lifted, and whispered to the press, "The king will regret crossing me." Within minutes, the footage went viral. Hashtags exploded: Camilla stripped, royal fallout, crown in crisis. Inside the palace, Charles stood at the window, watching the car disappear into the London rain. His shoulders slumped, his hand pressed against the glass. For a man who had once waited half a century to marry the woman he loved, the weight of that decision now felt unbearable. In a nearby hallway, Princess Anne approached him silently. "It's done?" she asked. "Yes," he whispered. "And yet somehow it doesn't feel like justice." Anne glanced toward the empty corridor where Camilla's voice had once filled the air. "Justice rarely does, Charles," she said softly. "But at least tonight the crown remembers who it belongs to." Outside, thunder rolled across London. Inside, the king turned away from the window, his reflection fading into the dark, and with that, a reign built on compromise finally met its reckoning. By the early hours of October 26, 2025, Britain woke to a monarchy forever changed. The official statement from Buckingham Palace dropped just after sunrise, a single page stamped with the royal crest, its tone cold and deliberate. By the order of His Majesty the King, the title of Queen Consort is to be withdrawn from Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, effective immediately. This decision reflects His Majesty's duty to preserve the integrity of the crown. The words spread faster than any rumor. Within minutes, the BBC interrupted its morning program. Sky News aired continuous footage of palace guards replacing Camilla's portrait with that of King Charles and Prince William. The royal household's website quietly updated. Her Majesty Queen Camilla became simply the Duchess of Cornwall. London stood still. Outside the palace gates, a crowd of thousands gathered, some cheering, others in stunned silence. For those old enough to remember the late Princess Diana, it felt like vindication. "At last," one woman told reporters, tears streaking her face. Diana's spirit has been avenged. In contrast, supporters of Camilla called the decision cruel and political. "She saved him when the world hated him," shouted one man, holding a sign that read, "She was the Queen of Endurance." But no protest could alter what had already been signed into law. The monarchy had turned a private fracture into a public declaration. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was tense, yet eerily calm. King Charles sat in the green drawing room, his face drawn, hands clasped tightly. The decision had broken him in ways the public would never see. He had stripped his wife of the crown, and in doing so, admitted that love had failed to save his reign. Prince William arrived mid-morning with Princess Catherine by his side. He offered no condolences, only composure. "You did what you had to do," he said simply. The people needed strength more than sentiment. Charles nodded faintly, his voice a whisper. "Strength is easy to fake, William. It's the silence afterward that's unbearable." Catherine, ever the quiet pillar, approached her father-in-law with a hand on his arm. "The monarchy has survived heartbreak before," she said. "It will survive this, but it must learn from it." Her words carried both comfort and correction, a lesson in grace Diana would have approved of. Across Downing Street, Prime Minister Keir Starmer delivered a brief statement to the press. "The monarchy is a symbol of continuity and stability," he said, "and His Majesty's decision today reflects that sacred responsibility." It was diplomatic, yet clear. The government stood with the king. In Paris, President Emmanuel Macron described the decision as a necessary act to preserve an institution greater than its individuals. Across the Atlantic, American networks compared the event to the abdication crisis of 1936. Royal analysts called it a bloodless revolution. As international reactions poured in, Camilla remained silent. She had retreated to Ray Mill House, her private residence in Wiltshire, where staff were instructed not to speak to reporters. But leaks soon emerged, offering a glimpse of the woman behind the scandal. "She's furious," one aide told the Times. "She believes Charles betrayed her to save his image." Another source claimed she had been overheard saying, "They'll all regret this, especially William." At the palace, Princess Anne met with Charles privately. "You did what Mother would have done," she said softly. "You protected the crown, even from itself." He looked up at her, eyes weary. "And at what cost, Anne? The people see justice, but all I see is loss." In public, the monarchy appeared stabilized. Behind the scenes, it was trembling. Staff were ordered to replace all monograms bearing C and C, the intertwined initials of Charles and Camilla, from official stationery and silverware. The order was discreet, yet symbolically devastating. That evening, a soft rain began to fall over London. Television screens replayed archival footage of Charles and Camilla's wedding, the laughter, the vows, the moment they walked out hand in hand as the world reluctantly accepted their union. Now, those images felt like relics of a failed fairy tale. In living rooms across Britain, families debated the meaning of it all. Some called it karma, others cruelty, but no one could deny its gravity. For the first time since the days of Henry VIII, a monarch had turned his crown against his own queen. As night settled over Buckingham, the palace stood illuminated, bright, unyielding, almost defiant. Inside, Charles remained alone at his desk, reading the public's reactions in silence. For a man who once believed love could outlast judgment, the verdict was painfully clear. The crown had won, but the king had lost. The countryside of Wiltshire was cloaked in grey mist when Camilla Parker Bowles, no longer Her Majesty, arrived at Ray House. The estate, once her sanctuary from the chaos of royal life, had become her gilded prison. Reporters camped outside the gates, cameras trained on the gravel driveway. They called her name relentlessly, but the windows remained shuttered, the iron gates sealed. Inside, the grand sitting room was stripped of its former warmth. The portraits of her and Charles that had once hung proudly above the fireplace had been removed. Only one remained, a photograph of her younger self, long before the crown, long before scandal. She stared at it often, as if searching for the woman she used to be. According to a housekeeper who had served her for 2 decades, Camilla had barely spoken since her return. "She doesn't cry," the woman whispered to the Daily Mail. "She just sits with her tea, watching the rain." But behind that silence, anger simmered. Those close to her said she felt not guilt, but betrayal, that Charles had chosen the crown over the woman who had stood by him for 50 years. He broke his promise, one friend told the Telegraph. He had told her she'd be his equal until the end. But kings don't have equals, do they? Though exiled from royal duty, Camilla's presence still haunted the palace. Her initials were being erased from official crests. Her personal staff reassigned. The royal household issued one final statement. Her Grace, the Duchess of Cornwall, will now pursue a private life outside of public service. It was bureaucratic language for banishment, but in private circles, rumors circulated of something darker. Tabloids hinted that Camilla had begun compiling notes for a memoir, a tell-all that could expose decades of royal secrets. The working title, according to one journalist, was chillingly poetic, My Side of the Crown. Those close to her claimed she felt cornered, humiliated, and ready to strike back. "She's not done," said a former aide. "She's lost the crown, but not her claws." Meanwhile, Charles tried to maintain normalcy, but the scandal followed him like a shadow. His public appearances were met with polite applause, but weary eyes. During a brief visit to St. Paul's Cathedral, someone in the crowd shouted, "Where's your queen now?" The king paused but did not respond. Later, aides admitted he had skipped 2 official meetings that week. "He's thinner," one noted. "He's aged 10 years and 10 days." In contrast, public sympathy shifted toward Prince William and Princess Catherine, now viewed as the future of a cleansed monarchy. The younger royals represented renewal, calm, beautiful, unmarred by controversy. Yet even they were not untouched. Catherine reportedly told a friend, "You can rebuild a crown, but not a family." At Raymill, Camilla received a visitor, Princess Anne. The encounter was brief, private, and tense. According to palace sources, Anne entered through the back gate to avoid photographers. Their conversation, overheard by a gardener, lasted less than 15 minutes. "You've made your point," Anne allegedly said. "But don't drag the rest of us down with you." Camilla's reply was sharp. "I didn't make the rules, Anne. I just learned how to play the game better than the rest." As Anne left, she turned back once. More. "History doesn't remember players," she said quietly. "Only those who pay the price." That night, the lights in Ray Mill House stayed on until dawn. Neighbors reported hearing faint music from the drawing room. Zadok the priest, the same. Anthem played at her coronation beside Charles. It was an eerie echo of a glory now gone. When the song ended, the house fell silent again. And so did she. But one thing was certain. The story of Queen Camilla wasn't finished. It was merely waiting for its next act. In the days that followed, the world debated not the scandal itself, but what it symbolized. The British press called it the final divorce between love and power. The Times wrote, "Charles chose duty over devotion and over the monarchy. For once, he chose survival." Political leaders weighed in too. President Donald Trump, in a characteristically blunt interview, remarked, "A king's job isn't to be sentimental. It's to lead." Meanwhile, Prime Minister Keir Starmer told Parliament, "This moment proves that even institutions born of privilege must answer to principle." Across Europe, reactions were equally divided. Emmanuel Macron called it a Shakespearean tragedy unfolding in real time, while the Australian press described it as the undoing of a queen who forgot she was mortal. But in the hearts of many Britons, there was only one lingering thought. Perhaps at last the ghost of Diana had found peace. To me, this story isn't just about betrayal or punishment. It's about accountability. No title, no jewel, no throne can shield a person from the truth. Camilla's fall serves as a mirror, reminding us that the higher the crown sits, the heavier its burden becomes. So, what do you think? Was this justice served or power abused? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know how this royal reckoning looks from where you are. And if you believe stories like this reveal the true cost of the crown, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because in the world of royalty, the truth is always more dramatic than